Chosen one. It's time for God to tell you everything. In the life of a chosen one, there comes a moment when silence begins to feel different. Not empty, not confusing, not heavy, but full of energy, alive, as if the air itself is waiting to speak. That is the moment. The moment when what was hidden begins to be revealed. When what was whispered in the darkness becomes clear in the light, when the burden you carry suddenly reveals its meaning. You have been through times when you didn't understand why some doors closed, why some people left, why some opportunities slipped away at the last minute. But now, the curtain is rising. Now is the time for God to tell you everything. Watch this video until the very end, because every word is connected and every part builds upon the last. There is a reason you were led here at this exact moment. In the comments, write your warmest wishes and write Amen along with the number 99. There is power when intentions align with faith. There is movement when belief meets expectation. This is a chapter about the moment when what you carried quietly begins to respond loudly, when the universe seems to echo what your heart has long known. But after this, we go deeper. Now, chosen one, like this video, subscribe if you're new, and let's begin. You always sensed that your story was different. Even as a child, there was something about the way you observed the world. You noticed patterns others ignored. You felt emotions others could not name. You carried a quiet intensity, a silent strength that people sometimes misunderstood. They called you too deep, too serious, too intense, too sensitive. But what they did not understand was that you were being prepared. While others were playing on the surface, you were being shaped in the depths. There were moments when you felt alone, not because you had no one around you, but because no one seemed to fully see you. You were present in rooms where conversations felt small, where ambitions felt shallow, where dreams felt limited. Inside, you were stretching towards something bigger, towards something eternal, towards something that had no name yet, but carried weight. And in those quiet nights when you wondered why you felt so different, God was already writing a narrative you could not yet read. There were battles you fought that no one applauded. Internal wars, questions about identity, questions about purpose, questions about why the path you walked seemed steeper than everyone else's. You watched others move forward with ease while you struggled through resistance. But the resistance was not punishment. It was refinement. The pressure was not random. It was positioning. Every setback carved clarity into you. Every delay built depth into you. Every disappointment stripped away illusions that would have weakened you later. And now, something shifts. It is subtle at first. A realization. A memory that resurfaces with new meaning. A conversation from years ago that suddenly makes sense. You begin to see how the pieces connect. The heartbreak that forced you to rediscover yourself. The betrayal that sharpened your discernment. The failure that humbled you just enough to rebuild stronger. Nothing was wasted. Not a tear, not a sleepless night, not a single moment of doubt. It was all part of the unfolding. God does not rush revelation. Timing is sacred. There were truths you could not have handled before. There were realities that would have overwhelmed the version of you that existed back then. But you are not that version anymore. You have been through the fire, and you did not disintegrate. You have been misunderstood, and you did not shrink. You have been tested, and you did not break. Something in you has matured quietly, steadily, invisibly. Think about the times you almost gave up. The nights when you stared at the ceiling asking why. The mornings when getting out of bed felt heavier than usual. You thought those moments defined your weakness, but in truth, they revealed your endurance. You kept moving. Even when you did not see progress, you kept walking. Even when you felt unseen, you kept believing. That persistence was not accidental. It was planted. There were people who underestimated you, people who saw your silence as smallness, people who mistook your patience for passivity. They did not know what was forming beneath the surface. They did not know that while you appeared still, you were becoming unshakable. They did not know that your quiet seasons were not empty. They were strategic. And now, you can feel it. There is a clarity in your thoughts that was not there before. There is a steadiness in your emotions that surprises even you. Situations that once triggered you now reveal themselves plainly. You see through masks faster. You recognize patterns sooner. You feel guided in a way that is hard to explain, but impossible to deny. It is as if the noise has lowered and the message has grown louder. This is what it feels like when revelation approaches. God has been observing every chapter of your story, not from a distance, but from within the very moments you thought were ordinary, the missed opportunity that redirected you, the closed door that protected you, the delay that strengthened you. What you once labeled as setbacks were often safeguards. What you once called loss was sometimes liberation. There is a difference between information and revelation. Information fills the mind. Revelation shifts the soul. And what is happening now is not merely intellectual. It is internal. You are beginning to understand why certain friendships faded, why certain environments became uncomfortable, why certain dreams had to evolve. You are outgrowing old versions of yourself, and with that growth comes truth. Truth is not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrives gently, like a quiet knowing, a sense of alignment, a feeling that the pieces finally make sense. And when God begins to tell you everything, it does not come in a single thunderous announcement. It unfolds layer by layer, memory by memory, realization by realization. You start to recognize your resilience as intentional design. You begin to see that your uniqueness was never a flaw. Your depth was never a burden. Your intensity was never excessive. It was necessary. The world you are stepping into requires exactly what you carry. There is also something else happening. You are no longer chasing validation the way you once did. Applause feels less important. Approval feels less urgent. There is a rooted confidence growing inside you. Not loud, not arrogant, but stable. It does not need to prove. It simply exists. That is not accidental. That is alignment. The people who once doubted you may still not understand you, but their understanding is no longer required for your clarity. Their acknowledgement is no longer needed for your movement. You are stepping into a season where inner certainty outweighs outer noise. This is the part where the narrative changes. For a long time, you were trying to decode the silence. Now, you are realizing that the silence was decoding you. It was teaching you how to listen beyond the obvious, how to perceive beyond the visible, how to trust beyond the tangible. The silence was not absence. It was preparation. God does not reveal everything at once because growth cannot be rushed. Imagine if you had known 5 years ago what you know now. You might have been overwhelmed. You might have tried to force outcomes that needed time. You might have stepped into rooms you were not yet ready to stand in. But now, you are ready. You feel it in subtle ways. A new boldness in your decisions. A calmness when facing uncertainty. A sense that even if the path is not fully visible, it is steady beneath your feet. This is what happens when revelation meets readiness. There were seasons when you felt like you were losing, but now you can see that you were shedding illusions, shedding attachments, shedding expectations that were too small for where you are going. Loss has a way of clearing space, and that space is not empty, it is intentional. When God begins to tell you everything, it includes the truth about your strength, the truth about your capacity, the truth about why you had to walk alone at times. Solitude sharpened you. It taught you to hear your own voice without interference. It taught you to distinguish between external pressure and internal conviction. There were conversations you replayed in your mind, moments you wished you could rewrite, decisions you questioned. But as clarity unfolds, regret transforms. You begin to see that even your missteps contributed to your awareness. Even your detours expanded your perspective. Nothing was isolated. Everything was integrated. And now, you are no longer the person who simply waits for answers. You are becoming the person who recognizes them when they arrive. This is only the beginning. Because when it is time for God to tell you everything, it is not about overwhelming you with secrets. It is about anchoring you in truth. It is about aligning your past with your present. It is about preparing your spirit for what comes next. You are not here by coincidence. You are not carrying this awareness by accident. The layers are peeling back. The fog is clearing. The narrative is sharpening. And as this unfolds, you will look back at this moment and realize, this was the turning point. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey when the past stops haunting and starts explaining. That moment does not arrive with noise. It does not knock loudly on your door. It settles into you quietly, like a sunrise that does not ask permission to light the sky. And suddenly, what once confused you begins to align. You start remembering things differently. The rejection that once felt humiliating now looks like redirection. The delay that once felt cruel now looks like protection. The season where nothing moved now reveals itself as a foundation being poured beneath your feet. You realize that while you were waiting for visible change, invisible construction was taking place. You thought you were stuck, but you were being stabilized. You thought you were overlooked, but you were being observed. You thought you were falling behind, but you were being positioned. And when God begins to tell you everything, one of the first truths revealed is this: nothing in your life was random. Think about how many times you felt like you were walking alone. How many times you felt misunderstood by people who were physically close but spiritually distant. There were conversations where you felt unseen. Rooms where your energy did not match the atmosphere. Environments where you felt like a visitor instead of a participant. At the time, it felt isolating. Now, it feels intentional. You were not meant to blend in. You were not meant to dissolve into average spaces. You were meant to stand apart, even when that separation felt uncomfortable. The loneliness had a purpose. It carved independence into your character. It forced you to build internal strength instead of relying on external reassurance. It taught you how to survive emotional droughts without losing your essence. That was not accidental. That was design. There is another truth unfolding now. The very traits you once tried to soften are the traits that define you. Your intensity, your vision, your refusal to settle, your discomfort with superficiality. You used to wonder why you could not simply be content with what satisfied everyone else, why your spirit kept reaching beyond what was in front of you, why good enough never felt good enough. Now you understand. You were not restless. You were aware. You were not dissatisfied. You were discerning. You were not difficult. You were different. And when God tells you everything, He reveals the origin of that difference. It was planted long before you recognized it. There were seeds placed inside you that required specific conditions to grow. Conditions that included pressure. Conditions that included solitude. Conditions that included misunderstanding. The fire you walked through was not meant to consume you. It was meant to clarify you. Look at how your perception has evolved. Situations that once felt chaotic now appear structured. People who once intimidated you now appear transparent. Opportunities that once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. This is not coincidence. This is maturity, aligning with revelation. There were years when you felt like you were in training without knowing what you were training for. You learned patience when outcomes were slow. You learned restraint when emotions were high. You learned silence when speaking would have complicated things. You learned observation when participation was not required. All of it was building something. God does not waste seasons. Even the ones you labeled as dark, especially the ones you labeled as dark. In those seasons, you were stripped of illusions. You saw who was truly for you and who was only present when it was convenient. You discovered how strong you could be without applause. You learned how to endure without constant affirmation. You learned how to stand without leaning. Now that strength is visible, not in arrogance, but in steadiness. There is something powerful about becoming calm in situations that once would have shaken you. It signals growth that cannot be faked. It signals inner alignment that cannot be borrowed. You no longer react the way you used to. You respond differently. You observe longer. You move quieter. That is transformation. And here is another layer being revealed. The setbacks that once felt like detours were often divine delays. There were opportunities you desperately wanted, doors you knocked on repeatedly, outcomes you prayed would unfold quickly. When they did not, it felt like denial. But what if it was protection? What if stepping into those rooms too early would have fractured you? What if carrying certain responsibilities before you were refined would have crushed your confidence? Timing is not accidental. God sees beyond your current horizon. What looks late from your perspective may be perfectly aligned from a higher view. And now, as clarity grows inside you, you can feel that alignment tightening. You are no longer chasing what once obsessed you. Certain desires have shifted. Certain ambitions have matured. You are not abandoning dreams. You are refining them. You are not lowering expectations. You are elevating standards. There is also a release happening. You are releasing resentment, releasing comparison, releasing the need to explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. That release is not weakness, it is freedom. When God tells you everything, part of that revelation includes truth about others too. Not to expose them publicly, not to shame them, but to free you internally. You begin to see clearly who was meant to walk with you for a season and who was meant to walk with you long term. You stop trying to revive expired connections. You stop romanticizing what drained you. Clarity is merciful. And as this clarity expands, your confidence stabilizes. You are no longer easily shaken by opinions. You are no longer easily discouraged by temporary setbacks. There is a deeper awareness guiding you, a quiet assurance that you are not wandering, you are advancing. Remember the moments you almost compromised your standards just to feel included? The times you considered shrinking your vision so it would not intimidate others? The conversations where you edited yourself to be more acceptable? Those versions of you were learning. But this version of you understands something greater. You do not need to shrink to be supported. You do not need to dim to be safe. You do not need to lower yourself to be loved. When God reveals everything, one of the clearest messages is this: you were never meant to minimize your light to comfort someone else's insecurity. There is also truth about your resilience being uncovered. You survived things that should have broken you. You endured emotional storms that could have reshaped your identity. You carried responsibilities that felt too heavy at times. But here you are. Not shattered, not erased, not defeated. You are wiser, you are steadier, you are sharper. There were nights you cried quietly, days you smiled publicly while battling privately, moments you questioned your worth, moments you wondered if your efforts mattered. Those experiences were not invisible. They were recorded in your character. Now you can see the accumulation of strength inside you, and something else is happening. You are beginning to feel anticipation instead of anxiety. Where there used to be fear about the unknown, there is now curiosity. Where there used to be doubt about your capability, there is now quiet expectation. That shift is powerful, because when God begins to tell you everything, He does not only explain the past, He prepares your spirit for what is ahead. You may not know every detail of what is coming, but you know this: you are not the same person who once felt lost. You are not the same person who once felt fragile. You are not the same person who once needed constant reassurance. You have been shaped, you have been sharpened, you have been strengthened, and the story is not ending, it is unfolding. The layers of confusion are peeling away. The patterns are becoming visible. The connections between your pain and your power are becoming undeniable. You can now see how your sensitivity became discernment, how your struggles became depth, how your solitude became strength. Nothing was wasted. Not your tears, not your waiting, not your silence. Everything was shaping you for this moment. The moment when truth feels heavier than doubt, when clarity feels stronger than confusion, when inner certainty outweighs outer noise. This is the continuation of revelation, and you can feel that more is about to be understood. There is another layer unfolding now, one that reaches deeper than memory and further than explanation. It is the layer where identity becomes undeniable. Not the identity people projected onto you. Not the identity shaped by temporary roles or expectations, but the core identity that remained intact through every season. For years, you adapted to survive. You adjusted your tone in certain rooms. You softened your convictions around certain people. You learned when to speak and when to remain silent. That adaptability was not weakness. It was intelligence. It was awareness. But beneath every adaptation, your essence remained untouched. Now you are returning to that essence. When God tells you everything, one of the clearest revelations is about who you have always been. Not who you tried to become, not who others expected you to be, but who you were designed to embody from the beginning. There were times when you doubted your path because it did not look like anyone else's. You watched others follow predictable timelines, predictable milestones, predictable successes. Meanwhile, your journey felt irregular, unconventional, sometimes even delayed. But what felt delayed was actually distinct. Your path was never meant to mirror someone else's blueprint. Comparison only created distortion. It blurred your vision. It made you question progress that was happening in ways you could not immediately measure. Now you see that uniqueness was protection. If your journey had looked like everyone else's, you might have blended into spaces that were too small for you. Instead, you were separated. Not to isolate you, but to differentiate you. There is power in differentiation. It requires courage to walk a road without visible footprints ahead. It requires inner stability to continue moving when validation is scarce. You developed that stability, quietly, gradually, without applause. And here is another truth rising. The opposition you faced was not accidental either. There were moments when resistance seemed to appear the moment you gained momentum. Just as you felt clarity, confusion tried to enter. Just as you felt progress, obstacles seemed to multiply. At the time, it felt unfair. It felt targeted. It felt exhausting. Now you understand something deeper. Resistance often confirms significance. If your presence carried no impact, there would have been no reason for pressure to surround it. If your potential was small, it would not have attracted friction. But what you carry shifts environments. It changes dynamics. It exposes insecurity in those who lack your depth. And so pressure followed you. Not to destroy you, but to strengthen your structure. Pressure reveals foundation. Weak structures collapse. Strong structures stabilize. You did not collapse. You adapted. You recalibrated. You rose again. That is not coincidence. When God tells you everything, He reveals that your endurance was evidence of design. You were built to withstand more than you realized. That realization alone changes how you see yourself. Think about how differently you move now compared to years ago. You do not rush as quickly. You do not trust as blindly. You do not react as impulsively. Experience refined your instincts. Pain sharpened your perception. There was a time when you mistook intensity for urgency, when you felt that everything had to happen immediately or it would be lost forever. Now you understand that what is truly aligned cannot be stolen by timing. What is meant to unfold will unfold. This understanding calms you. It removes desperation from your decisions. It removes panic from your perspective. It allows you to observe instead of chase, to discern instead of assume. And that discernment is part of the revelation. God does not simply explain events. He sharpens vision. You begin to see connections you once ignored. How certain people entered your life exactly when you needed a lesson. How certain departures cleared space you did not realize was crowded. How even your mistakes taught you precision. Nothing was isolated. Everything was instructive. There were also hidden strengths within you that only emerged under pressure. Leadership qualities you did not recognize. Emotional resilience you did not know you possessed. Strategic thinking that only activated when stakes were high. Those qualities did not appear randomly. They were drawn out of you by circumstance. And now you can see them clearly. You are not as fragile as you once feared. You are not as uncertain as you once believed. You are not as limited as you once assumed. There is also a transformation in how you handle silence. Before, silence felt like abandonment. Now, silence feels like preparation. Before, silence felt like absence. Now, silence feels like alignment. You have learned to trust the quiet. That trust did not develop overnight. It was forged in waiting, in unanswered questions, in seasons where clarity seemed distant. But now, when silence surrounds you, it does not intimidate you. It steadies you. This is growth. And with growth comes responsibility. Because once revelation begins, ignorance is no longer comfortable. You cannot return to old illusions once truth has been seen. You cannot pretend not to know what has already been revealed. That is why this moment feels different. There is a seriousness in your spirit. Not heavy, but focused. Not fearful, but aware. You understand that stepping forward now requires authenticity. No more pretending. No more shrinking. No more disguising depth to make others comfortable. You have outgrown performance. You are stepping into presence. Presence is powerful. It does not need exaggeration. It does not need decoration. It simply exists with certainty. When God tells you everything, it includes the truth about your influence. You impact more people than you realize. Your words linger longer than you assume. Your energy shifts rooms more than you recognize. You once questioned whether you mattered. Now you see evidence that your presence creates ripples. Some people were intimidated by your clarity. Some were inspired. Some were exposed. But none remained unaffected. That is significance. And significance requires responsibility. Not pressure, but awareness. Awareness that how you move matters. Awareness that how you speak shapes atmosphere. Awareness that how you carry yourself reflects something greater than ego. You are no longer moving unconsciously. You are moving intentionally. There were times when you wished for easier paths, simpler circumstances, fewer complications. But if the path had been easy, would you have developed this depth? If the road had been smooth, would you have gained this strength? Probably not. Depth is rarely born in comfort. Strength is rarely formed in ease. And now, instead of resenting the difficulty, you are recognizing its contribution. The narrative is changing inside you. What once felt like misfortune now looks like molding. What once felt like injustice now looks like instruction. What once felt like abandonment now looks like redirection. God was not silent. He was strategic. You are not behind. You are aligned. You are not late. You are prepared. And there is still more being uncovered. Because revelation does not end with explanation. It leads to expansion. Expansion of mindset. Expansion of vision. Expansion of identity. You are expanding beyond old limitations, beyond inherited beliefs, beyond labels that never fit. You are stepping into a clearer understanding of your story. And with that clarity comes confidence. Not loud, not boastful, but grounded. The kind of confidence that does not need validation. The kind of confidence that does not fear opposition. The kind of confidence that recognizes design. This is the continuation of truth unfolding. You are seeing your past with new eyes. You are seeing yourself with new respect. You are seeing your future with new steadiness. And the more you see, the more you realize. This was never random. It was always intentional. It was always building toward this. And this is only part of what is being revealed. There is a deeper shift happening now. One that moves beyond understanding your past and begins to transform how you stand in your present. You are no longer just reflecting on what has happened. You are embodying what it created within you. For a long time, you carried questions. Questions about timing, questions about fairness, questions about why certain things unfolded the way they did. Those questions shaped your inner dialogue. They made you analyze, rethink, revisit, and reconsider moments that felt unresolved. But now, something inside you has quieted. Not because you have all the answers in a detailed, step-by-step explanation, but because you have enough clarity to trust the architecture of your journey. You see structure where you once saw chaos. You see alignment where you once saw disorder. When God begins to tell you everything, the revelation is not just about events. It is about perspective. Perspective changes everything. You once saw closed doors as rejection. Now you see them as redirection. You once saw delays as stagnation. Now you see them as preparation. You once saw separation as loss. Now you see it as protection. There were environments you begged to remain in, relationships you tried to preserve, situations you tried to fix, and when they dissolved, you felt destabilized. You felt exposed. You felt uncertain about what would replace them. Now you recognize that some things were not meant to be repaired. They were meant to be released. Not every structure in your life was built to last forever. Some were scaffolding, temporary supports that helped you reach a certain level. Once you reached it, they were no longer necessary. You were never meant to live inside scaffolding. You were meant to stand inside foundation. This is the difference you feel now. Your foundation is solidifying. Your values are clearer. Your boundaries are firmer. Your vision is less negotiable. There is a strength in you that does not need to prove itself. It simply knows. And knowing is powerful. Think about how easily you used to be shaken by other people's opinions. How a single critical comment could linger in your mind for days. How doubt could multiply quickly when someone questioned your direction. You internalized too much of what was external. But now you filter differently. You observe without absorbing. You listen without surrendering your discernment. You remain open without becoming vulnerable to every voice. That maturity did not appear randomly. It was cultivated through experience, through disappointment, through realizing that not everyone's advice is wisdom. Not everyone's criticism is truth. When God tells you everything, part of that revelation includes the understanding that discernment is protection. You are not meant to trust blindly. You are not meant to accept every narrative handed to you. You are meant to evaluate with clarity. Clarity sharpens confidence, and confidence stabilizes movement. There is also a release happening internally that is subtle but profound. You are letting go of the need to rewrite history. You are no longer fantasizing about how things could have been. You are accepting how they were and recognizing that how they were shaped who you are. Acceptance is not defeat. It is alignment.